Hello students, welcome to series 2 of your literature chapters. Why series 2? Some of these chapters were deleted in the previous years. Hence, I thought, let me start a new series now of all those chapters which are not there on YouTube. So we start with Going Places, one of my favorite chapters, and I always tell my students this is somewhat like a Mills and Boons story. So let's start Going Places. A little bit about the author A.R. Barton. He's a modern writer who lives in Zurich and writes in English. He has become very prominent in the literary world on account of his writing style and storytelling abilities. The main theme of the story, Going Places, describes the aspirations of the youth and the pain of unfulfilled promises as well as shattered dreams. It deals with the theme of adolescent fantasy and hero worship. Going Places centers around the phenomena of daydreaming and pursuing unrealistic dreams during adolescence. Most of these fantasies turn out to be impractical and beyond belief, which causes sadness and despair in the adolescent's life. Those who have read the story, they know who is this adolescent. Now, let's look at the main events in the story. So, the story revolves around Sophie, our main protagonist. And as the story opens, we see Sophie and Jancy, two teenagers. They are coming back from school. Sophie is in her imaginary world thinking of becoming a boutique owner or a fashion designer or maybe an actress. She shares her feelings with her friend Jancy. Sophie does not appear to be very pragmatic, whereas we find that Jancy is a very realistic person. Why? Because she knows that they are earmarked for the biscuit factory. But Sophie does not want to hear all that. She reaches her home, but when she reaches her home, there is something about her middle class home which chokes her. Why? Because she looks at her father who's sitting over there scooping shepherd's pie into his mouth. She looks at her mother. She watches her back stooped over the sink and actually wonders at the incongruity of the delicate bow which fastened her apron strings. There is something, and on account of which Sophie feels a tightening in her throat. And she leaves everything and she goes looking for her brother Jeff. Jeff is an apprentice mechanic. He has been out of school for 3 years and he travels to work each day to the far side of the city. But as we see, we find that Jeff speaks very less. And because he speaks less, Sophie is jealous of his silence. He is busy with his work, but Sophie thinks that in his imagination, like Sophie, he was also visiting those places, exotic places, which she had never been to. In fact, she imagines herself riding behind Jeff, he wearing a new shining black leather jacket and she wearing a yellow dress with a kind of a cape, and there is all applause and greeting and everything. That is the kind of dream that she sees and imagines. So quite unexpectedly, she tells Jeff, I met Danny Casey. When he inquires where did she meet him, she says in the arcade. Jeff is not ready to believe all this, but still he tries to listen to her and Sophie goes into the details of describing how he looked and all that, but at the same time, she does not want that this secret should be shared with their father. Now, Jeff, being Jeff, goes and tells it to their father that Sophie has met Danny Casey, but both of them are not ready to believe that actually she had met Danny Casey, to the extent the father goes and says that one of these days you are going to talk yourself into a load of trouble. Sophie cannot say anything. They go and watch a match, a football match. That's probably the only time she sees Danny Casey. On the basis of that, she concocts a date with Casey. And children, those who have read the story, they know that she actually goes and waits for him, hoping that Casey would come. But Casey does not come and she feels disheartened. She walks back with a very heavy heart, but as we all know, the story ends with Sophie visualizing him again near Royce's, thinking that she has met him again, and the story ends with this line, and then the explosion of sound as he struck it crisply into the goal, the sudden thunderous eruption of exultant approbation. So Sophie is not able to come out of her dream world despite the disheartening episode. We all know Sophie is an incurable daydreamer and escapist. She dreams of having a boutique, as I said, becoming an actress and a fashion designer. She considers the young Irish footballer Danny Casey as her hero. She knows she can't get him. It makes her sad. All the dreams and disappointments of Sophie are the creations of her own mind. This can be an answer to a very important question, that dreams and disappointments of Sophie are actually the creations of her own mind. Let's look at some of the important lines from the chapter. First one, it wasn't a Jansi kind of thing. Remember the context? This was said when Jansi comes and inquires from Sophie about Danny Casey. And Sophie had shared this secret as a sibling secret with her brother. She did not want that this particular thing should be shared with anybody. And Jeff actually goes and shares it with Jansi's brother. And then Jansi comes and asks Sophie about the reality behind her meeting with Danny Casey. And therefore, Sophie gets angry with her brother and says it wasn't a Jansi kind of a thing. Next is, resignation was no sudden thing. Now remember, when Sophie was waiting for Danny Casey and he did not turn up. So this line was, it comes in the chapter at that moment. So means that resigning from one's desires and thoughts is a difficult task. It takes time. Sophie gets so pulled into her made-up story that she starts believing it to be true. It became tough for her to resign from her thoughts. And therefore, it's an important line. As a 2-marker also, it's important. Yet another line, I will have to live with this burden. Again, this is an extension of the same context. When she walks back to her house and she feels that she will have to live with this burden. So she visits a secret place near a canal to meet her hero Casey. She realizes that Danny Casey isn't coming. Her heart is broken. It is not the first time when she feels miserable like this. And she feels that she doesn't have a face to show to her brother and her father. Let's look at Sophie's character. Sophie is the story's teenage protagonist who, despite her dismal working class life, spends much of her time fantasizing about a glamorous and wealthy future. She appears adrift in her home, alienated from all her family members except her brother Jeff. To impress Jeff and the rest of her family, Sophie concocts an elaborate fantasy that she met Danny Casey. She goes to wait for Danny Casey. As she realizes that Danny Casey isn't coming, her heart is broken. She feels romantically jilted, but more than that, she knows that she will have to confess to her family that he did not come, and they will have one more reason to dismiss her. Sophie's fantasy of Danny Casey was really a fantasy of her own success. This can come in conclusion. Now, in your long answers, remember, children, to highlight or underline these keywords. Can you see? I've done it on the slide just to show you that keywords need to be underlined. Other characters in the story, we have Jancy. Jancy is Sophie's friend. Both are from the working class, but as we have seen, Jancy is considerably more realistic and pessimistic than Sophie. She knows that they are earmarked for the biscuit factory. She also noted as a gossip monger who is unable to keep secrets. This is Sophie's way of putting it. Casey is a famous football star who is greatly admired, described as a young, bright, beloved prodigy. The version of Danny Casey that Sophie creates is gentle, has soft eyes, and is kind towards her. Casey of her fantasy is meant as a stand-in for her, someone living Sophie's own dreams of success. We have Sophie's brother Jeff. He's an apprentice mechanic. He's a man of few words, Sophie trusts only him and shares all her secrets. And that's why she goes and talks about Danny Casey with her brother. Sophie's dad, a strong, hurly-burly, hard-working man, loves to watch football matches, does not believe in Sophie's imaginary stories. All these characters, children, remember, they are very important as your two-marker questions. Let's solve some CBSE type questions. Now, this is the reference to context question. The paragraph which is taken is, after dark, she walked by the canal along a sheltered path lighted only by the glare of the lamps. This one. So the questions on this particular reference to context are, after dark, where did she walk along? After dark, Sophie walked by the canal along a sheltered path lit only by the glare of the lamps from the wharf across the water. Why I'm showing you these answers, just to give you an idea that for 1 mark, you should not write the entire story. Yes, children, that is very important. Not only because unnecessarily the examiner is not going to read the entire answer, also you are wasting a lot of time. Next one, why was that place suitable for meeting? Simple answer. The unceasing drone of the city was muffled and distant, so that place was suitable for meeting. Next question, where and why did she sit? There was a wooden bench beneath a solitary elm where lovers sometimes came. She sat down there and she was waiting for Danny Casey. Why was it a perfect place? Same kind of a question, see. It was a perfect place because lovers meeting there could not be observed by anyone. So you should know how to answer similar kind of questions. Short answer questions. Jancy and Sophie, in spite of being friends, were poles apart in their approach to life. How? Jancy and Sophie, we've already done it, that they were poles apart. Why? Because Sophie was an incurable dreamer and escapist, whereas Jancy was realistic and pragmatic. We can also give the example that Jancy knew that they were earmarked for the biscuit factory. Now, this is a long type of question. In what ways does Sophie's claim contribute to our understanding of the complexities of her relationships within her family? So, this highlights her desire for recognition and validation. Very important. She wanted that kind of validation from her brother, especially. It also talks about unmet needs and communication gaps within her family. Seeking recognition might stem from a need for acknowledgement and attention. She might feel that her family, particularly her father and Jeff, may not fully appreciate her dreams or interests. That's why it talks about recognition and validation. Meeting a football star becomes a way for her to gain a sense of importance within the family, because she knows that her father and her brother, they are all lovers of football and they really admire Danny Casey. Misunderstanding Jeff's disbelief and skepticism communication gap indicates differing perspectives on aspirations, isolation, and longing for connection, her secretive nature about her supposed meeting with Danny Casey. Now, this is again a long answer question. It is from the sample question paper. See how there is a cross connection which has been developed between Aunt Jennifer's tigers and going places. It says their mother sighed. Sophie watched her back stooped over the sink. This is from Going Places. In Aunt Jennifer's tigers, the massive weight of Uncle's wedding band sits heavily upon Aunt Jennifer's hand. So now the question is, imagine a conversation between Sophie's mother and Aunt Jennifer. Create this exchange with reference to the two extracts given above. So what do you write in such a dialogue, in such an exchange? Something like this should come there. Now the problem here is, children, many times you all talk about only one chapter. As I said, it's a cross chapter thing. So you have to talk about Aunt Jennifer also, and you have to talk about Sophie's mother too. So Aunt Jennifer shares about her loss of identity. She talks about that. She says that art she is using as a means to express her own aspirations. Whereas Sophie's mother, she shares the information about her servile role, how she is treated in her family. She has no life of her own. Sophie's mother stays at home while all others are enjoying Danny Casey's football match. Something like Mother's Day, remember? Both feel burdened with responsibilities. Both have domineering husbands. They do not have a say in the family matters. There seems to be no likelihood of any change in their status. So you are talking about Sophie's mother as well as Aunt Jennifer. Do not talk about just one character. Remember that. Okay, it's a long answer, 120 to 150 words. And that's about it. Good luck. Like and share if you have found this video helpful. All the best. God bless.